Hi, how are you doing? Good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is McKenna. If you guys don't know me yet, that's okay. I'm excited for today. That's what you guys should know. I'm excited just how God's gonna speak and God's gonna work through this. I know it's presentation time, we have our sermons. It's, I don't know what you're feeling, but maybe anxious, maybe adrenaline, maybe just oh my gosh, today's the day, I gotta lock in. And it's time and it's here and it's really, really cool what God's gonna do. And so whatever you're feeling, maybe subconsciously, maybe you feel it blatantly, but it's internal that today's the day of starting to size up other people. Okay, this is how they did their introduction, and this is how they had a really, really strong hook to begin with. Or maybe okay, I watched McKenna do her illustration and it totally flopped. I know at least I'm gonna be better than she is. And whatever we're feeling, whatever we're thinking, maybe subconscious or not, we have this problem of just sizing up other people and maybe having too much pride in our own ability and our own strength of okay, no matter what, even if I crash and burn, I know I can make it through because I won't be as bad as someone else. Or I know they did so much better than I do, so I need to step up my game a little bit. And whatever these feelings are as we're preparing for this next couple weeks ahead of us of giving our own sermon, I just want you to I want to challenge you guys, whatever you're feeling, just to kind of the stress of the day, the stress of this event, this preparation, to kind of just take a deep breath and be here and be now and be ready for what God has to say, because He's gonna move and I'm really excited for it. And God's gonna do some awesome things in your preparation, and you're learning from other people and watching God grow you and all of this really cool things. I work in a pretty big church, which is a cool opportunity for me, and I get the opportunity of having a large preaching team. And so there's 4 to 6 pastors that I hear speak very, very regularly, and to the point that I know how they speak. And I've learned their habits and their rhythms, and if they have a lot of energy or if they're kind of a boring preacher, and I watch them a lot, and to the point that I've stopped learning what they're preaching and I've started learning who they are. And I've started to size up who they are. And to the point that I know where their downfalls are, and I know what they're gonna say before they say it. And in so many ways that it turns to the point that I'm no longer focusing on God and God's message and how God's speaking through it, but it turns into this critique of oh, if I were preaching it, I would have said it differently. And I start this internal monologue, anytime I'm in sermon, that I was oh, they didn't quite land that point as well as they should have, or oh, I wouldn't have said it that way, or oh, they totally went over everyone's head. I'm starting to judge the way that they're preaching, and I'm starting to judge how they're communicating, and what an incredible miss that this moment that God has given us of listening to people speak and listening to people preach and listening to God working through them, my pride and my ego of okay, I could do better than them, or I size up I'm not as good as them, and I think so much about myself, and I think so much about how I would rank in comparison to their skills or their talents or their abilities. And to just name the issue that we all have, it's pride and it's ego, and it's the idea that we are better than other people, or maybe we're not better than other people, but it's this concept that we're just so incredibly ingrained in, of this sinful, fallen, broken world, that we have to be the best, or we want to try better. And maybe we hear someone and we're oh, I'm for sure better than them, or maybe I need to try a lot better, I know I'm not better than them, and we get this internal, and it becomes all about us. And it becomes all about who we are and where we rank on other people's talents and other people's skills. And this problem is not a new problem. It's existed for all of time, as long as sin has been in this world. And Paul, when talking to the Romans in chapter 12, that's where we are today, he is addressing the same problem of pride and of comparison and of ranking ourselves better than other people. In chapter 12, verse 3, if you guys want to open there, if you're there. If not, I'll give you a second. It's Romans 12, verse 3. We're going to be reading a couple verses, but we're going to start there today. And this is Paul talking to the Christians in Rome. And he says this: because of the privilege and authority God has given me, I give each of you this warning. Do not think you are better than you really are. Be honest in your evaluation of yourselves by measuring yourselves by the faith God has given us. Be honest. Be honest in how you evaluate yourself. Be honest in how you rank yourself, how you interact with other people. Being honest is such an important role. And we see this like in their context, right? We have the Church of Rome, that is like an incredible like clashing point between converted Jews and Gentiles. And we have the Gentile believers who were running their own church for a couple of years while Nero kicked out the Jewish believers, and they came back, and we get this clash of who's better, of who is actually in leadership in the church and who's in charge of like what's going on and who has like a better relationship with God and who has this like special connection in this history. And there's such a clash of who is outranking who and who is better. And we see Paul go like, whoa, 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 none of that's what matters. What actually matters, like this is the problem that you're facing, and it's not about who ranks better. We're all equally sinful. We're all equally under the same level of not measuring up to God, and we have this problem, and it's so ingrained in us that we're just broken, and we're sinful, and we hit this wall every single time of like, maybe I am better, and maybe I'm not better, and we try to compare ourselves with other people, but we never make it. And as Paul is addressing this situation, he calls them to be honest in evaluating yourselves. Be honest in how are you measuring up, or how are you presenting yourself? How are you interacting with other people? How are you, in comparison to what God has called us to be, in comparison to who God has designed for us in our lives, right? If we look back in the beginning of chapter 12, it talks about how the ultimate goal is to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And the way we see that live out is by evaluating ourselves and by seeing and acknowledging like, okay, like I know I cannot measure up. I know I am broken. I know I am fallen. I know I am sinful. I know I can see it that I will not measure up. And let's be honest that in comparison to God, we're nothing. We fall short every time. And it's just this reality that if this is the broken world that we live in, and if we're in the situation that every single time we fall short, like what is this life that we're actually supposed to be living? And what is this call that we're supposed to be striving for if we're just gonna fail? And we have this corrupt nature to veer towards jealousy and to veer towards pride and to turn into like comparison and ranking ourselves before other people. We need to be honest with our actual state. And in verse 4, it picks up and it says like what we're actually called to, like how do we look differently? And it says this: just as our bodies have many parts, each part has a special function. So it is with Christ's body. We are many parts of one body, and we belong to each other. And this is like the turning point. This is like our big, like main idea of this entire passage here, is that we're not just meant to live in our brokenness, and we're not just meant to be stuck in the ways of corruption and of evil and of comparison, but we're supposed to be united. We're supposed to belong to each other. So we're supposed to be honest for what our actual state is, but we're also supposed to belong to each other. And what this idea looks like, it looks like working in unity, and it looks like not just caring about yourself and not just promoting yourself and not just saying like, oh, I'm the best, I know I'm better, but it's living sacrificially in community for each other. And it's living with the mindset that if we're an arm just cut off from the body, as strong as the arm is and as impressive as it can be and all its skills, if it's cut off from the body, it's just a dead arm, right? It doesn't have the life, and it doesn't have the spirit, and it doesn't have the connection that we are called to have, like working in the body together. And we're supposed to live self-sacrificially for each other. And if we're desiring this transformation, this renewal of living life like Christ calls us to live, we need to understand that it's not something we do alone. And it's not something that we can like manage and manifest by our own strength. We're supposed to do this in community. And community is the whole point. Like being a part of the church is like the whole point of how we grow closer to God. And we can't evaluate ourselves, we can't be honest in how we evaluate ourselves if we don't have people spurring us on closer towards God. We need to be in community, and we need to belong to each other, because that's the whole point. The whole point is living in community. And the whole point of it is to like spur each other on to be closer towards God. And if we're just living by ourselves, and if we're stuck in the mindset of like, you know what, I watched a sermon online today, I'm good, that's my church time. Or, oh, I went on a walk with God and I like met God in the mountains, like that's my church time. Or if we're letting our relationship and our growth be determined by our TikTok theology of like, oh, my Instagram was spiritual enough, that's my time. Like that's not the transformation we're called to. That's not the life we're supposed to be living. We're supposed to be in community with one another, being the example of Christ's body. We are called to live and belong to each other. And this can be really complex and really complicated because we live in such a like me-centered world. We live in a mindset and a world that like, okay, like I am gonna go for myself and I wanna be on top and I wanna be the most successful and it doesn't matter the other people around me, like I am my own person. But we see here like it's so counter that this is just communal language of how we're supposed to do life together and how we're supposed to be transformed. And in verse 6 it picks up and it gives us this example of what does this actually look like? And what does it mean to live this out and to be in community? And when we're honest with our evaluation of ourselves and we are in community, the fruit of that is the gifts that we have. And it's our interactions and it's how we're able to build each other up. And so we're supposed to be honest in evaluating ourselves, and we need to belong to each other, but we're also supposed to build each other up with the gifts that we have. In verse 6, it picks up and says this: in his grace, God has given us different gifts for doing certain things well. So if God has given you the ability to prophesy, speak out with as much faith as God has given you. If your gift is serving others, serve them well. If you're a teacher, teach well. If your gift is to encourage others, be encouraging. If it is giving, give generously. If God has given you leadership abilities, take the responsibility seriously. And if you have a gift for showing kindness, do to others and do it gladly. We have these gifts and we focus so much on like, okay, like I have this strength or I have this talent, I have this ability, like this is like God has blessed me and look at how awesome I am. But we're missing so much of the point that the point of our gifts and the point of our talents has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with our own strength. It has nothing to do with our own ability, but it has everything to do with God. And it's a gift that He freely gives us, whether it be our preaching and whether it be our prophesying or our teaching or encouraging. It's all communal language and it's all for serving other people. And some of these are gifts that God gives us in moments, and sometimes it's gifts that God gives us for an entire lifetime, but that's not the point. The point is that it's for community and it's for building each other up. And if we go back to this idea that we live in such a world of comparison of, oh, I can do better than them, or I can preach better than them, or I can teach better than them, or I know how to be a better greeter on a Sunday morning than someone else in our church. Like that's where we get so caught up in like a me-centered world that we focus so much on like, oh, I know I can do better. I know I would be better at so-and-so doing whatever, but that's not the point. The point is to live in community and to serve each other. And what like a miss it would be if I was the only one preaching on a Sunday morning and forever only people heard my entire voice, right? And what a miss it would be if I was the only one tithing to the church, right? We would lack in our growth and we would lack in our ability. And what a miss it would be if I was the only one who was giving wisdom and leadership. And if we make it all about me, that's where we miss the gifts that God has given each of us uniquely. That there are times that we are serving in the nursery, and there are times that we are filling in pulpit supply, and there are times that we have to hang out with teenagers or on the parking team holding signs waving at new people. And the most important thing is not to rank which one's a better gift or who's better at their gift, but it's to acknowledge and see that we are supposed to be in community, and we're supposed to use our gifts for each other, for building up of each other. And I think this is something we miss so often when we get into this mindset of like me first and me and this is what I want and this is what my plan is, that when we have volunteers don't meet our expectation, we're like, oh, I would do that better. Or we have like a guest preacher come and like totally flop, like, oh, I could have done that, or I should have like been the one there. But we like skip over the power and the ability that God has to work in all of his believers. And it's the same Spirit working in every single person that believes in God. And there's no junior Holy Spirit for youth group, and there's no like, oh, I'm a new believer, I don't understand. Like, we're called to live in community, and we're called to build each other up by the same Spirit. And as seminarians, as people working in ministry, like, this might be a problem that you face one day, that you will be the most biblically illiterate in a room, and you might be the person with the most preaching experience, and you might be the person who has the strongest gifts or has practiced and worked out their gifts the most. But that doesn't mean we neglect the other people, and it doesn't mean like, oh, just because I would be a better small group leader, in no world can we lead all of the small groups, and in no world can we fill by ourselves every position. We need to work in community. We need to strengthen other people's gifts. We need to be pouring into each other. And so first we need to evaluate ourselves. And we need to honestly come to, who are we, and how are we acting, and how are we living in comparison to the standards, to the dream that God has given us of being transformed and growing like him, and by renewing our minds and strengthening to becoming more like him. We need to be honest in evaluating where we are, what are our strengths, and how do we live out in our strengths, and how do we step out in our strengths where God is calling us, and not shy away from the incredible power that he has given us, and he works through us. Like, don't shy away from that. Be confident in him using you for your gifts. But we need to be honest that it's not all about us. And it's not about us being a one-man show, and it's not about us running our own church, and it's not about us doing our own thing, but it's about belonging to each other, and it's about serving one another, and it's about pouring out everything we have, our identity, our unity, our connection, to be one in Christ. And once we be honest with that, and once we belong to each other, then we are able to begin to build each other up. And we build each other up with our gifts and with our strengths that God has given us, not for our own glory and not for our own identity and our own accolades and our own, like, oh, McKenna did such a great job of doing this. Like, that's such a downfall that we fall into, but that's not the point. The point is community, and it's church congregation and being together with each other. How incredibly sad would it be if we missed that? If we left seminary or left this class saying like, oh, I've got it, I know how to run my own church by myself. Like, that's not what it's about. It's not about like being the best head of the church. It's about supporting your church to thrive and flourish and support each other, because that's how we live in community. We live together, we live for each other, we live for God. And I don't want us to miss who's actually the one speaking here. It's Paul. And Paul is a pretty impressive person, right? He's got the accolades, he's got the years of scholarly studies, he's met Jesus, he's interacted, he's had years and years of just growing with God. He's an incredible writer and public speaker. He has the gifts, and he has the talents, and he has the knowledge, and all of these things, but he doesn't boast in it. He uses his gifts and he uses his talents to build up other churches, right? To say like, hey, Roman church, like, these are your issues. Like, not because I'm better than you, but because I have this authority and the privilege that God has given me. Not my own strength, not my own ability, not my own accolades, but God has given me this, and I'm going to give it back to you, and I'm going to let God work through me and work through my ability to write this. Paul has every ability and every opportunity to boast in his own skill, but he doesn't. He boasts in Christ, and he boasts in this idea that it's all about God's body, and it's not about who we are, and it's not about how we interact with each other, but it's this upside down, like, countercultural idea that he starts to show here, is that it's not about who we are, and it's not about what we do, and it's not about like what we can do, but rather when we're faced in a culture that is so incredibly saturated with like me-centered, and so incredibly saturated with like, I need to be the best, and I need to try the hardest, and I need to be number one in everything, Paul steps in, he's like, that's not the point. The point is to be transformed. And the point is to renew your minds and to be living out the way that God has designed us to live in community and live for one another. And it's this upside down countercultural world that he has called us to, that God wants us to live. And it's so incredibly different. And that's what makes it so hard, that we have this little seed of like jealousy inside of us. And we have this little like, oh, like I could be better. This pride that corrupts us. And the pride is the roots to all other sins. And that's exactly what Paul is calling out here, that it's not about you, it's about the church.